Hello, everyone. I'm Darien Gold, and welcome to All Things Pilates, Season 7. In this season, you'll hear inspiring stories about the healing power of Pilates and from teachers around the world who will share how they're helping to make Joseph Pilates' wish come true by bringing more attention to the gift he left us. Contrology, transforming bodies one studio and one country at a time. Our guest today is Jillian Hessel, a Second Generation Pilates teacher who has had the great privilege of learning from many of Joe Pilates' students, including Kathy Grant and Carola, who both became Jillian's mentors. And a very soulful bond developed between Jillian and another JP student, Ron Fletcher. Jillian refers to herself as a teacher of hybrid movement modalities and incorporates ballet, Iyengar yoga, and the different approaches of Contrology into her teaching. Her diligence in caring for the Pilates legacy she so generously was given makes her an extremely valuable addition to the Pilates community. I've asked Jillian to let us in on her thoughts about 43 years of sharing her life's work. Welcome to the show, Jillian.
Thank you for inviting me, Darien. It's nice to meet you and get to know you.
I know. Thank you. Jillian, you began your movement career as a ballet dancer. At what age did you start ballet, and how long was your dance career?
I believe I started after doing kind of creative movement as a preschooler, seriously around 7. And at 12, I went to a ballet camp up in Massachusetts in the Berkshires, close to where Joe worked at Jacob's Pillow. And I ended up with blinders on. I wanted a ballet career more than anything in the world.
What was it about ballet, though?
I think I was a very shy, introverted person, which no one would believe now.
Never.
But I was very shy. My mother was an actress and very extroverted, and I was a silent child. And I usually let her talk for me, and I loved music and movement and was very happy not having to speak.
So your mom was theatrical.
Very much so.
You got that. She probably used her hands a lot and her body a lot. You probably felt inside her womb the sense of movement even before you came in.
I think probably that's true. She was not a trained dancer. She was a trained actress and a real natural dancer. And the thing I think that was unique about our bond, I was the only daughter, I have an older brother, was that she had grown up in Washington State in a working class family. In high school, they encouraged her to do vocational training to become a secretary and a typist and pursue a career like that. And she always told me, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers in the movies, which was a big deal. And she just dreamed of an acting career. And she marched in to her guidance counselor and said, I want a college preparatory course. I am going to go to college. No one in her family had ever done that. And she saved her pennies after graduating from high school for a year waitressing and ended up getting into the drama program at the University of Washington, Seattle. And in her 3rd year of drama school, the war ended in 1945, and she was picked. They picked 2 students from her drama program to travel across the country on a USO tour and take a steamship to Europe. And she entertained the troops, the American troops that were still left, of course, stationed post-war in Europe. And she told me about that life-changing experience. And I just was thrilled, to hear that she had done something so bold, and also that she encouraged me in my aspirations for a dance career, which many parents would not.
You had your ballet experience up in the Berkshires. and then it was full on?
Well, I went to this summer camp for a month when I was 12 and begged my parents to stay for the full 2 months, which I was able to do the first year. And I went back in the second year when I was 13, and they had a master class with Jacques Dembois, who was a principal dancer with Balanchine, of course.
Yes.
And he came in and taught that class, and he had just tunnel vision for me in the class. And I had never been singled out at my local ballet school in Austining, New York. I grew up just north of Manhattan. I had never been singled out before. And I think that it was probably my build and
Legs.
long legs and the Balanchine build. And he came up to me after the class and he made eye contact with me. I was so shy. And he asked me my name, and I said it was Jill. And he looked at me and he said, well, you have to act like you have, and he spelled it out on his chest, Jill, across your chest in diamonds.
God.
And I was just stunned.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was advised by the ballet teacher who had also taken me under his wing at the ballet camp for 2 years in a row that I wasn't getting anywhere at my little local school. And it was time, if I wanted a career, to pursue something else. And I lived within commuting distance to New York City. So I auditioned for the SAB, the School of American Ballet, preparatory for New York City Ballet. And
you got in.
I got in. So that's when things got very serious for me at age 13.
So you lived at home, then you would train in, I guess you would train.
Yeah, I took the train down. I grew up in Tarrytown, the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and I started commuting into Manhattan in my high school years and compacted every half credit from studying typing and driver's ed to graduate at age 16 from high school. I was just determined that that's what I wanted to do. And I got into the Stuttgart Ballet School in Germany. After that, at 16, I went to live in Stuttgart and study at the John Cranko School.
Did you have to audition for that company?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it wasn't the company. It was the school. And I just was in love with the drama and the beauty of John Cranko's choreography telling a story.
And you ended up staying there for how long?
I was too young. I kind of freaked out. I think I lasted about 3 or 4 months, and I just was miserable. And I had to come home. And by that time, I had left SAB and gone to the Harkness School on a full scholarship. And I went back to Harkness and became, at the time, it was run by David Howard and Maria Vey. And they gave me a full-on scholarship with a paid stipend weekly to become a Harkness trainee. And that was the most incredible program. Luigi taught jazz, which was kind of a lyric jazz style, very rehabilitative. You know, he had been in a car accident and been paralyzed, and his work was beautiful. And Harkness was very forward-looking. They had something called therapeutic bar, which had all kinds of spinal undulations and warming up each of the joints before we began with pliés at the bar. We always did therapeutic bar. It was very, very physiologically efficient. And I think that really fed into my love of Pilates.
Yes.
You know? Mm-hmm.
Okay, so your dance career started around 6, 7-ish, and then you have all of these experiences. How does George Balanchine come into the picture?
Well, when I was 18, I guess I'd been at the Harkness trainee program for about 1.5 years. A former principal dancer with New York City Ballet, Patricia Neary, was appointed. She had been ballet mistress at the Berlin Ballet, and she was about 30, maybe 32 years old, and Balanchine scored her the job at the Geneva Ballet in Switzerland to be director. And she decided she was going to take on the European soloists and principals, of course, that were previously employed there, but she wanted a corps de ballet that she could form from young girls. And so she went to the Joffrey School, ABT, Harkness, SAB, of course, and she recruited young dancers to join her corps de ballet, and I was one of them. So I went back to Europe to live in Geneva this time.
Not scared. You weren't scared this time.
No, well, first of all, I loved French, and I had become fairly fluent in French in high school, and it was a completely different vibe than living in Germany. Being in Geneva, it's a very international city and quite beautiful on the lake, Lac Le Mans, Lake Geneva, I guess it's called in English. And I was prepared. And I just loved it. And Patricia was amazing because we were considered at that time a Balanchine satellite company. Europe was just discovering Balanchine, and nobody from the European ballet schools was trained to move as quickly. And Balanchine, of course, known for speed and musicality and neoclassical style. So this was why Pat really wanted her own corps de ballet she could form. So her classes were amazing, and it was such a privilege. And Mr. Balanchine came over periodically to rehearse us. So he taught class, he staged.
What was that like?
Well, he was amazing because he was so, he was a trained concert pianist in addition to his skills as a dancer and choreographer.
Do people know that?
I don't think it's commonly known, but when he worked and he was a contemporary of Stravinsky, for example, he could read all the scores. And at one point, I'll never forget, he was teaching us a ballet class, and he did not like the tempo of the pianist who was accompanying class. And he got so frustrated, he finally had the pianist stand up and leave the piano bench, and he sat down and played exactly how he wanted the music to sound, which kind of blew us all away. It was so inspiring.
So talented.
Yeah, no, he was multifaceted. So I have a picture that is part of my collection of him staging the ballet Serenade, the opening, where we were all supposed to be trees in a forest, and he's holding my hand. So proof that I worked with him.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was very inspiring. And Pat brought in Richard Cragen, Egan Madsen, and Marcia Haydee to do Romeo and Juliet. So I got to do my Cranko ballet as well. So it was really wonderful.
Wonderful, wonderful. Did you finish your ballet career in Europe, or did you end up from that experience coming back to New York?
Well, in Geneva, I had a real life-changing experience kind of early on. In one of the rehearsals, we had a wooden floor. Eventually, they put the Marley floor down. But at that time, we had a wooden floor, and it was very slippery. And I slipped and did what I call the classic banana peel, feet up in the air, and landed on my tailbone. And my back went into such a horrible spasm. It was frightening. I couldn't even breathe without pain, turn over in bed. And fortunately, in Europe, paid job, paid medical leave and vacations and all the rest of it. They take care of their artists much better there. But they sent me to this doctor who did x-rays. And he said to me, "Mademoiselle, this is not just from the fall.
Oh.
You have a very, very prominent double S curvature of the spine." And he showed me my x-ray, and I just couldn't believe it. It was like a snake S curve.
Were you born? You were born with that?
No. It's called idiopathic scoliosis, and it's more prevalent in girls than boys, although boys do get it. But most often it rears its head during puberty. So now puberty is earlier for girls growing up today. But in my case, it was around 12, 13 that I did have a back spasm, and it went away, and we kind of ignored it. And when I fell, it became very obvious that this was something on beyond just a back spasm, So that became something that I really had a rope around my neck, because everybody pushes themselves, of course, as a professional dancer. It's very competitive, and we have a small window of time where before we age out, nobody wants to miss a performance. People do get injured. And I don't think I realized at the time that it wasn't just performance fatigue and blisters and bunions in my feet and so on, or a pulled hamstring. I was really dealing with quite a severe problem with my back. So to answer your question, I spent 3 years dancing in Geneva. I moved for a year to the Frankfurt Ballet, and there I danced Swan Lake in the corps, which meant 4 acts of dancing, and it was quite a lot of toll on my body. And when I came,
but you're still dancing, and you're dancing in pain with pain.
Yes, I was. And when I returned to the States, I stopped for a time. Then I resumed with modern dance, pickup companies, I was in New York at the time, and I started part-time studies at NYU, thinking, oh, maybe I'll become a dance teacher. But I found that I really didn't like teaching dance all that much. I got nervous, maybe because of the Balanchine background, that, what I was choreographing wasn't musical enough and wasn't inventive enough. It's a tall order when you've done Balanchine. So I started taking class outside of NYU itself with this wonderful program, and went to the Graham School, and I started doing modern dance. And I actually
Graham technique is no joke.
No joke. And with my long legs, it was a long way to do those falls to the floor. But somewhere along the way, I got another pickup job with a company called Ballet Hispanico of New York, which is now an internationally famous company. At the time, Tina Ramirez, the founder, she passed away maybe about 5 years ago, sadly. But she recruited me because, thank God, when I was at Harkness, Rebecca Harkness, who was the founder of the Harkness School and Ballet Company, loved classical Spanish dance, and I had learned some flamenco well enough that I could fake it. So I had a season with Ballet Hispanico, and at that time, we also brought in a wonderful African-American choreographer, Tally Beatty.
Oh, yeah.
And Tally Beatty was doing a very African-based choreography for us, and there was an African dance called the Umbalu that involved this spinal movement, and I found I was terrified to move my back the way he wanted. It was because the scoliosis had worsened, the imbalance had worsened over time. So one of my fellow dancers said, "You should go to my movement coach." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Actually, to my gym." And my radar went off because I never liked gym class in school.
Because you thought of like bench pressing and those dumbbells.
Actually, more, it was like never being the first one to be picked for kickball. And the only thing I ever liked was when we got to do acrobatics, and tumbling. But the group sports, I just wasn't great at. Anyway, it turned out her movement coach, her gym, was Henry Bendel's. It was Kathy Grant's studio in Henry Bendel's department store back in the 80s. It was 1981.
So she called it my movement coach. She didn't say Contrology or the Pilates method.
She said my gym, to tell you the truth. It was called the gym at Bendel's. And it was all Kathy, but it was called the gym. And Mr. Pilates had specially commissioned the equipment. I forget the first person who was there when Kathy took over, frankly, but it was founded and Joe designed the equipment. It's very interesting because when I finally went there, I had been laid off for the summer and I had unemployment, and I thought, well, now's the time to go, if any. And the reformers, I didn't know because I'd never seen reformers before, but they had ropes. not straps. And they were designed by Mr. Pilates.
That's interesting.
Yep. She had 2 reformers, 2 low-wounded chairs, and a Cadillac, and then, of course, a high barrel, ladder barrel, and, of course, the spine corrector. She did not have a pedal pull. She did not have an armchair. But I went there, and I was so intimidated by Kathy. She's like, well, I don't know if I have time. You know, it was always her thing. She had to kind of audition you to see how devoted you were to really doing the work. I was like, I have unemployment. My back is killing me. I need your help. And I had tried chiropractors and acupuncture and foot reflexology and osteopaths and you name it. And my back was getting worse and worse, to the point I was age 26 and I couldn't sit in a movie theater or a car with the seatbelt on for more than 20 minutes without shooting sciatica down one side of my leg. Yeah.
It sounds like you spent so many years training your erector spinae and your spinalis muscles. They were like hypertonic. They were always having to work because you're always lifted. You weren't doing this, whether it's Graham or Cunningham or Horton, you weren't moving your body in maybe more natural ways. You were just very straight. So your spine never had a chance to have that experience. So the compression at some point was going to take over.
Well, and with the scoliosis, you have to picture one shoulder was higher. So I had spasms since 8th grade. In fact, I would try and throw a ball and I'd get a shooter, they call it, where you almost go blind from a nerve pinch up into my brain. And that was just my upper body. My scoliosis changed sides. I really have kind of a triple curve because there's a neck one, there's a thoracic one, and then there's a lumbar one. So the pelvic imbalance, one hip is higher, one hip is rotated forward. To this day, when I do something like rolling like a ball, I can feel the sit bones curl under 1, 2. They're not level. So everything was imbalanced, and my training, I refer back to now because Kathy Grant, God bless her soul, completely dissected me. She would not let me get on any of the equipment because she said, you are so misaligned, darling. If you get on the equipment, you're just going to overtrain what's overtrained and further imbalance yourself. You need to learn to breathe evenly into both sides of your ribs when you inhale.
What a concept.
And, often when we'll cue, I had no idea what she was talking about. When we cue somebody, often we'll say, inhale to prepare and move on the exhale. Well, the minute I had inhaled, my rib cage, and of course, nowadays it's hard to explain to people because young people don't know what a typewriter carriage is, but I learned to type on a typewriter carriage and it shifts from side to side. All I had to do was inhale to prepare. And we do it in dance as well. And my rib cage would shift like a typewriter carriage off to one side. I was so crooked, there was no hope of being level. So she sent me home with this assignment to learn to breathe evenly into both sides of my ribs. I had no idea what she meant. But she wouldn't let me get on the equipment, which was smart. And I went in with my inflated ego. I'm a trained dancer. Show me the movement and I can copy it. But that's the whole thing, that why I love Pilates so much, because we teach, as we always say, from the inside out. And from the inside out, I was so imbalanced that I had to be deconstructed and go back. And finally, after a month or so of training with Kathy a couple times a week, she said, I'm really frustrated with you because I spend all this extra time. I come in early to train you and I get you into some modicum of alignment, and then you go off to dance class and you come back and it's like, I've done nothing with you. She said, you need to stop dancing. Can you imagine telling a young dancer with clock ticking, you need to stop dancing and trust me? But I was so desperate, I realized she was right. So I quit dancing. And
you're 26 or you're 20?
Yes, 26. I quit dancing for the rest of the summer. And I just worked with her And I think I was going in 4 times a week at this point. And of course, I thought it was a big deal. I lived in southern Manhattan and had to take one train up to West 57th Street to Bintel's before the store opened. You know, you'd go in the back way and everything was dark, and Kathy was there. Well, she was taking 3 trains from Brooklyn to get there at 7 a.m. to teach me before she opened at 8 a.m. The dedication of this woman,
Wow.
was on. I know I wasn't the only one she was doing this for, believe me. She was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So she deconstructed me and then sort of gradually got me onto the reformer, and everything was customized for my problem. And to this day, it's the funniest thing. Years later, I thanked her for being patient with me. She says, honey, I'm not patient. I'm stubborn. Meaning she wasn't going to give up on somebody who wanted it that bad, you know, and she had a love for dancers, a real love for dancers. Of course, you know, meanwhile, she was training everybody at Dance Theater of Harlem. So the woman was phenomenal. Anyway, cut to my unemployment ran out after a time, and I needed a job. And she says, well, you know, I used to work for Carola Trier. She's only a few blocks away, and I'm going to send you over there. She's looking for a teacher for her studio. It runs very differently from mine, and she's older. And she...
Did you feel ready to teach?
No, not really. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I needed a job, and I didn't want a waitress. I knew that if I was on my feet waitressing, which is what most dancers did to make a living,
awful,
it would kill me with my back. I couldn't do it all those hours. So I toddled on over. It was, you know, a few crosstown blocks and 1 block north or 2 blocks north. Yeah, she was on West 58th Street, 1 block north. West 58th Street and 7th Avenue from between 5th and 6th on...
Oh my gosh, just right there.
Yeah. And Carola interviewed me. Oh my God, I walked in and I was just completely floored. It looked so different from Kathy's. Carola worked out of her own apartment that she lived in. She had a very different approach. She knew that I was referred by Kathy, so that was a good credential. And Carola's approach was to give you a one-to-one workout and experience what it was like and what was expected when a brand new client came in for their first session, which Carola always gave them. And she rolled...
The same protocol.
Yeah, pretty much, except, you know, she would roll out. It was very theatrical. You know, Carola was also a performer. And she had this mirror, which I have one too, not as nice as hers, on wheels. And she would roll it out, very theatrical, and stand you in front. And you would explore together with her your body, your postural alignment.
Yes.
And one of her famous lines was, so your back hurts? Let me see your feet, because the feet are the foundation.
Yes.
What's going on, you know? And so she would give the posture analysis. But what was very interesting, because later on, you know, there was no one-to-one in those days, really. I mean, there was rehab, but most people went through with their own customized program in a, you know, that's the way Joe's studio was. So the idea with her, though, was it was almost like we do today with our one-to-ones. You form a bond, but you plan together, seeing in the mirror, oh, yes, I can see what you're saying. My right shoulder is higher than my left, or I stand with one knee bent and the hip jutted out. And so you start seeing what her eye, which was an expert eye, saw. And then she'd take you through, and gosh, it went so fast after Kathy had done such a slow, careful preparation. Thank God for Kathy, because she moved me through in her circuit.
So Kathy was your first, and she broke you in gently, and you got to know your body in a completely different way. When you arrived at Carola's apartment/studio, did she initially look at you and go, we have the spine. Yes, we look at the feet. Did she make sort of the same assessments and determination Or had you already improved enough so that she could take you to the next step?
I'd already improved enough to the point where she took me through the circuit. And then later on, when I was watching and learning, it was discovered that Kathy had never had me, for example, employ my glutes strongly because I had sciatica when I went to her. So she was focused on my abdominals and my spinal alignment to begin with. So when I was learning, Carola called it jackknife on the reformer.
Overhead.
Right. And I couldn't snap my legs from roll over to vertical because I didn't use my glutes. And they were like, come on, what's going on? And, I look back and I realized why Kathy didn't focus on that, because I was so spastic.
She didn't want you rolling, probably.
She didn't want me doing any of those advanced moves, but we were expected to be able to teach them and spot them. And Carola was very hands-on. So what was interesting about her training was not only did I have to learn the protocol, and I felt like my head was stuffed full of cotton wool. I couldn't think that fast at first, It was like learning Balanchine choreography really quickly, but in a different modality. And not only did you have to learn the sequencing and how to adjust the equipment, but how to hands-on partner, which Carola was a master of, because she would push her clients to do things that they couldn't believe that they could do because her hands-on guidance was so spot on.
So she was maybe your first teacher to help you understand the power of your hands and the power of touch.
Well, Kathy was a poker. She poked and prodded.
As Clara did that.
Yeah. At one point, I remember her sitting on me, trying to impede me using all the wrong muscle groups. And she ran out of hands and feet and knees and everything she was using to hold me down. And she took her little chin and dug it into my upper trapezius, which wanted to hike my shoulder up. Kathy just used anything. But Carola was a certified massage therapist. She knew the body, and she knew the power of smooth movement as well as tapping to stimulate a muscle. And she was very intuitive. And she had just evolved this incredible hands-on guidance for each exercise that required it. Not every single exercise, of course, and not every client every time, but certainly when you were beginning, she was very, very rhythmic. She wanted a certain cadence to the footwork, and she actually would massage the legs to show clients the rhythm and dynamic that she wanted, because it was musical with the breath. Of course, not music playing in the background, but she was very specific about what she wanted.
Hey everybody, are you ready to master your moves? So finally, the long-awaited update of my 2 Studio Darien mobile Pilates apps has arrived. Hallelujah. As you may know, classical Pilates is more popular than ever, and I was determined to once again offer you a classical Pilates resource. So my team and I redesigned these apps into one amazing app called Pilates Mastery. In this app, you'll find the 5 original videos and an added video called The First 7. 2 other sections never presented before, Pilates in 5, and my special series, Gold Talk. Pilates Mastery is available in the App Store and Google Play. Also, for those who have left such glowing reviews, thank you so much. It really helps to get the word out. And now, back to the interview. How long did you end up teaching there?
I taught there about a year only, I believe. My mother was dying at the time, and she became this hard taskmaster in the studio and yelling at me and yelling at other people. And then she'd take me into her kitchen and make coffee. And now what's going on with you? Because she knew that I was having a really, really hard time. And during that time that I worked for her, my mother did pass, and she was the sweetest to me. She was like my grandmother, I guess. And I had an opportunity to move to Florida I flew down there and, at a friend's behest, another ex-dancer, well, she is now. And she said, they want you and come and audition. I know you're going to get the job. And I moved
Who's
to
they? Who's they?
It was a company, a small company that had been originally Coconut Grove Dance Theater in Miami. And then they renamed themselves Dance Miami. And I got the job and I said, well, I can't leave yet. My mother's just passed away and I have a wonderful job and I need time. And they were very understanding and they waited for me. But I thought, I cannot leave Carola in the lurch. And I was still taking classes at the Graham School. I did actually get to take class a couple times with Martha Graham, believe it or not.
Was she amazing?
Oh, my God. She was really amazing. She was in her 90s by this time. But she had such an aura about her that when she walked into the room, of course, everybody, if you're stretching on the floor, you stand up, to acknowledge the teacher. The first class, I didn't even notice, and she sat teaching from a chair. But I didn't even notice that she had such arthritic hands. They had kind of frozen into her contraction shape, By the second class, I noticed, but her aura was incredible. And so anyway, yes, that was quite an experience. But I had met a dancer there who was a wonderful, wonderful mover, but she wasn't getting into the company. She carried a little bit too much weight, unfortunately. And I thought, wouldn't she be a fabulous teacher? And I approached her and said, I'm leaving because I've got this job. Would you be interested in learning to teach, with Carola Trier, Pilates? And she said, oh, I took class a few times there. Well, guess who that was? Deborah Lesson.
Oh.
So I referred Deborah Lesson to Carola to take my job because I thought Carola will completely freak out. And so Deborah Lesson got my job and I went on to perform in Florida. And I did love that because I was...
Your back was better.
My back was so much better. It's one of those things, and I'm sure anyone who has a dance background feels the same way. I wish I had found this method sooner. I would have been such a better dancer.
Oh, we all say that.
But I was such a better dancer by this time. And I was able to incorporate my modern work in Miami. We had Norman Walker, who was also a principal dancer for a time with Martha Graham, come down and set a piece on us. And it was really a wonderful time for me.
Have you left the 20s and now you're in your 30s? Because when does a man come into your life?
Oh, I had boyfriends. I'm not going into that.
Oh, so you got married later on.
I got married later on, but it was the freewheeling time when you just moved in with people.
Yes.
And pretended you were married or a couple. And I had one in New York and I had one in Florida. And then I had one out in California where I live now before I got married.
It was your long legs.
Yeah, well, that was never a problem, but I had a lot of personality, as you can imagine. And the one that I lived with in Florida had been in an arts program in college, but chose engineering. And he kept saying to me, Jilly, you need to decide what you want to do when you grow up. And that just really upset me because, as a dancer, as we all know, tick tock, you want to dance while you still can. And by this time I had dancing and teaching Pilates. I started doing both with the dancers in the company, and I got another job up in Boston, and that was wonderful because I had the modern dance background and went back to dancing on point with them. That was called the New England Dinosaur Company. And we had Hans von Maunen's piece, In and Out, and I got the lead duet in that. And we got to go back to New York on tour, and I danced at the Joyce Theater. So that was the thrill of my life, to really put my modern dance, my Pilates, and ballet all together in a piece.
But in your mind, are you thinking at some point, even though I don't want to think about it, that the window is closing? In your mind, were you thinking, I'm probably going to have a Pilates career?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, in Miami and in Boston, I made extra money on the side because the dancer pay was so bad. Teaching, absolutely. I choreographed and taught for the Miami Opera. They had a movement program, and I taught the young singers movement. So I knew that I was going to be teaching Pilates always, always. And when I got to California,
What years are we talking about?
I moved to California in 1986. So I guess I was 31 by that time.
Wow, so different now.
Yeah, I thought, but at that time that I would have a career dancing out here. I got one of the first jobs I auditioned for to go to Japan. And subsequently, it became very difficult because hip hop was coming in and Michael Jackson was, doing that slide thing. And I just, I could do
Technique dance was not appreciated in LA.
I could do the lyric jazz. I could do the ballet. My singing wasn't strong. I hadn't ever really gotten rid of, now I've taken singing lessons and I've learned how to use my voice properly. But it became more and more obvious that I needed another job. And I got the idea to teach Pilates out here. And I met a fellow dancer who I had trained with at Harkness and then subsequently danced with in the Frankfurt Ballet, Diane Diefendorfer, who had come after Frankfurt Ballet out west to dance for Johnny Clifford in LA Ballet, Los Angeles, another Balanchine person, John Clifford, and she had hurt her knee. So she went to Ron.
Yeah.
So we met at Stanley Holden's dance studio. Everyone was taking with Stanley back then in LA. I don't know if you ever took his class, Darien. But I said, I really need a job. And she was like, well, come to Fletcher's, So that was my introduction to Michael Podwell and Diane Severino, who had kind of taken over from Ron. He, at this time, was living in Texas, but coming to LA a lot to teach. So I met Ron, and of course, Ron was incredibly dynamic and charismatic in a way that Martha Graham had been. And, he had a storied career here in Beverly Hills and attracted all of the stars in the 70s.
He opened the first Pilates studio, correct?
He opened the first studio for body Contrology. He used the word Contrology. He was massively successful on a scale that no one had ever seen before.
Because it's mostly on the East Coast. It hadn't really blossomed.
It was on the East Coast, and as it turns out, Eve Gentry, after she underwent her radical mastectomy, I'm sure you know that story, she moved out to Santa Fe, and she was like an outpost there, and she was Carola's age. Carola and Eve Gentry were older than Kathy Grant, Ron, Romana, Lolita. I don't know how old Robert Fitzgerald and Bob, I'm blanking.
Bob Seed.
Bob Seed. Yeah, I don't know the ages of everybody, but hold on, I've got another book here. I'm forgetting somebody. Oh, Bruce King. Yeah, Bruce King.
Oh, yes.
Rule of the Bones. Yeah, I don't know the ages of everyone, but I do know that Eve and Carola were a good 10 years older than everyone else. And kind of missed the boat as Pilates rode the wave in the 90s. By that time, both of them were tired.
Sure.
But anyway, Ron was wonderful. And I loved him because he had that Fletcher percussive breath.
Can you explain that? Because it's completely opposite from the way we were taught.
I know. Ramona never liked loud breathing. And Kathy...
And she said neither did Joe.
Right. And Kathy Grant she was the one permissive studio that Ron knew he could send his West Coast people when they went to New York, because a lot of the celebrities did, of course, that they could go to Kathy's studio, and it was non-judgmental. And I remember in Kathy's studio, she would say, "Oh, don't mind them. That's the California breathing, you know, and that's just the way they do it, and it's fine, and you don't have to do it." But it was interesting, Darien. I had done a workshop back in the 80s before I moved to Florida with the Twyla Tharp Company. And watching up close Twyla rehearsing her dancers, they were doing the Catherine wheel. She was choreographing at this incredibly difficult piece that was like a marathon. And she had her dancers up early in the morning going for jogs. I mean, the stamina to do this piece was phenomenal. The acrobatics that she was using, Twyla Tharp was driven and still is. Still is. And watching her rehearse those dancers, they were huffing and puffing like huge before they lift somebody. I mean, you could hear them like steam engines breathing. And I went, oh, you know, and I started experimenting in dance class with plie, breathing in, breathing out on my plies and using the breath. And then when I met Ron, I went, thank you. Why shouldn't, you know, and if you go to a gym and you hear men huffing and puffing in a gym, they're all breathing, you know, and it does feel natural. But Ron's whole point was, and this is the way I explain it, we have, you know, the breathing muscles are your diaphragm, which of course moves down into your abdominal cavity. That's the active part of it, right? It's muscularly pulling down so that the air rushes in on the in-breath. You have the intercostals, which are opening the ribs as well. And those, of course, can be trained. Divers, swimmers, singers, train all of these muscles. I thought that Joe's genius was the idea that on the exhale, we're contracting the abdominals, in particular the transversus, which wrap like a belt, to aid the automatic recoil. It's like an elastic recoil of the diaphragm. You can train the intercostals to either open and or close the ribs. And of course, we do that as well. But that posterior lateral breathing is aided by that percussive drawing in and up, as we say. And I've never been a fan of navel to spine. I feel like it's halfway between the navel and the pubic bone, a little bit lower where the womb is.
Yes.
And so Kathy gave me that, but I didn't do the loud percussive breathing in those days. And when Ron made it okay to breathe, I went, wow, I really like this. Because of course, he was from the Graham Company and all of her movement was based on breathing, exaggerating that breathing. And it all came together when I met Ron.
At what point after that experience did you decide to start your own thing?
Well, I was teaching at Fletcher's, but I should say, just for reference point, in 1981, when I started teaching for Carola as an apprentice, because the top teachers were making $10 an hour back then on the floor, I made $4 an hour as an apprentice. And then, you know, it would go up gradually. But 10 was the top pay for those experienced teachers. And then when I moved out here and met Diane and got the job with Fletcher, I got paid $7 an hour. But I could go off to dance auditions and not, you know, be penalized if I got an audition and I called in and, you know, they'd get somebody else. So, but it wasn't making ends meet. And I met someone else in the dressing room at Stanley Holden's who said, you know, you should become a personal trainer. And I was like, what's that? Well, Body by Jake was big. Remember that? Jake, the big strapping guy. And then there was another woman who had a thing called Full Circle Fitness, Rebecca Eastman. And she was training. Her claim to fame at the time I met her, Lily Tomlin, for that one-woman show, The Significant Science of the Universe. And it was kind of like the Catherine wheel. It was this marathon one-woman show. And circuit training was big. So I interviewed with her and she said, well, Pilates is okay for rehab, but, you know, you need to get the heart rate up. So her thing was she'd train me to do, have a client warm up on a bike or a treadmill for 10 minutes. And then that was their legs, right? So then they'd go and do chest presses, and there was circuits that you had to do, and then go back to the bike and then go back. And she'd look at my records and she'd go, well, you're not doing this fast enough. You're not getting in all the double circuits. And I'm like, but I can't. Their form is horrible. They're doing the overhead press and their shoulders are up, and they're not using their abdominals. And I went, well, wait a minute. Maybe there's room here to do personal training with Pilates. Why not? So I like to think I was one of the first people, because this is in the mid 80s, to think about personalizing Pilates, because it wasn't a thing, as we all know. It was a group thing where people were more independent in those days of Joe and Kathy and Carola. And you got a new exercise sometimes, but it was added in over time. It wasn't a one-to-one for a whole hour. So that's what I decided I wanted to do. And I got my first reformer in 1988. It was made by what is now Balanced Body, but was then Current Concepts.
Current Concepts. Yeah.
Ken Endelman. It was made with pine wood, which no one makes equipment with pine anymore. I love it because it's the old-fashioned leather straps and the rollers like a Grotz, but it's a bit longer than the traditional Grotz. And with my long legs, it works very well for me, but it's simple.
Yes.
And that's how it started. And I started to realize with Rebecca Eastman, she said, well, you don't have a college degree. Rub it in. I had my NYU a couple of years, and then I dropped out when my mom was dying, and I never went back. And I had gotten into UCLA, but I thought, I don't want to go back for a dance degree. At this point in my life, I'm in my 30s, and I don't need to perform. So UCLA had an evening program in their continuing educational department to become a certified fitness professional. And I thought, this is good. I can run my business during the day and take this certificate program. I had to do a preamble. I went to Santa Monica College and studied human biology. Then I had exercise physiology. We had to do Olympic weightlifting. We had all of these different kinesiology classes. And I learned an awful lot. But, part of it also was learning about heart rate and cardio fitness, which I had never studied.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I got that certification first through American College of Sports Medicine, then American Council on Exercise. There was no Pilates certification, and I felt that I needed to have an upgrade on my credentials because there was nothing in the Pilates world at that point.
Right.
So you were going to ask me, I think, one of your questions about the certificate program, certificated.
Yes, you at some point decided that you were going to have your own certification program.
Well, no, I did not. I was contacted by Michelle Larson, who lived in Santa Fe at the time and was the protege, picked by Eve Gentry, exactly. And she had formed the Institute for the Pilates Method along with Joan Breitbart, who was sort of the business mind, Eve Gentry, who was the first generation teacher, and Michelle, who was her protege. And she got me on board, and she got Rael Izakowicz on board. And I flew, I don't remember, this was around 1990, 1991. And we started putting our heads together on how to make a certification program for Pilates teachers. And at that time, it was get the mat first and then go on second level to the equipment. But one of the things that I loved about screening people to even get into the mat program was that they had to do an audition. They didn't have to teach Pilates, but they had to show how they taught some kind of movement discipline. And you saw how that person communicated with their student. Did they do hands-on guidance? Were they comfortable? teaching somebody some kind of movement discipline. And then they also had to do call it a multiple guess quiz, about 20 questions, but they were clever questions. They were things like, which group of muscles are used in the classical Pilates mat exercise called swan dive? And you had to know back extensors, hip extensors versus abdominals or quads or whatever. You just had to know the exercise and the muscle group. And not everybody, of course, could pass every question, but I thought that was great because I had one guy audition who had been a Pilates student but not ever taught Pilates. He was a swim coach, and he actually gave me a little coaching session for his audition on how to do the breaststroke, and he was great.
Beautiful.
But I had other people, like they hadn't studied Pilates, or they'd studied Pilates, but they had no anatomy background. I was like, go back and study some anatomy. Like I had to do to get into that program at UCLA. I had to do all these prerequisites before I could even get into the program. And I find now that we've kind of lowered the bar, unfortunately, with that.
Yes.
But anyway, we had that program going, and I became the LA provider for the certification for the institute, the original Institute for the Pilates Method.
And this is in the early 90s.
Yeah, exactly.
And then if we fast forward to sort of current, or I think that in the pre-interview you talked about these last 5 years or so, you have this on-demand legacy library, which sounds very interesting. Will you tell our listeners about it?
Well, thank you for asking about it. What happened was the COVID lockdown. And, and during this time, in my early 40s to mid 40s, we adopted 2 children from birth and raised them. My husband and I got married late, and I had always wanted a family and was not able. I kept conceiving and miscarrying. So as my kids got older, I got back on the circuit, traveling and teaching and so on. But of course, keep in mind, cell phones, iPhones with videos came in, and people started videoing me and so on. And it was a bit unregulated. And when COVID lockdown happened, we had sold our larger house and we're looking for a smaller place. And I was just like, I have to keep teaching. I can't stop. I've just gotten my feet wet again because my kids are older. And so I went online, one of the first people, I think, on an online platform, and started teaching 3 times a week. By this time, I'd been to Asia, and so I had classes, in the evening that were the next morning in Asia. And I just love teaching so much. And we were talking before we turned the recording on, Darien, about all the tech challenges. I've tried to keep up with that, but what happened was I ended up with this body of recorded classes, and my husband is older than I am and has had a serious illness. COVID was a wake-up call. You start realizing about your mortality and what is your legacy. And I realized, I don't manufacture equipment. I have my book, which I wrote, and we didn't even talk about that for a time before the internet really got big. I was picked up by an international company called Gaiam that had me write a book, Pilates Basics, which was intended for people not Pilates teachers, although it became very popular with Pilates teachers, but to learn Pilates at home. And their idea before all the bookstores closed was that you would sell this combination, the book. It was, at first it was VHS, then it went to DVD, right? And a relaxation CD to meditate. And it was like this holistic program to learn Pilates at home. And of course, all mat work. And I had evolved my own warm-ups, as Kathy called them back in my day, and then coined the word before the 100s. I have my beam fundamentals: breathe, energize, align, and move. So I started collating all the classes from COVID. I've continued with my Zoom classes, and of course, really built up my social media presence as well, which I'm quite proud of because I've done it all myself. It's a lot. I have this library. I think now there's probably about 170, 175 recordings. Some are the old DVDs that I did before there was all this digital downloading stuff, and some of my old teacher training manuals and stuff like that. And then ongoing classes. I'm teaching one. Actually, we're recording this March Madness 2025 just finished, right? So tomorrow is my March Madness recap. And I'm doing a 2-hour extravaganza of doing 1 through 34. But I've never been able, honestly, even in my 20s, without a good warm-up first, able to do classical 1 through 34. There's some challenging stuff there. So I have my own way of teaching with the breakdown and the breathings I described. And that's my legacy to the Pilates profession. When I'm no longer here, I'm hoping to find a way to either merge my library with someone else's and still have it there so that, of course, I'm on Pilates anytime too, but this is my stuff. Kind of happy to be creating this while I'm still here and still teaching and adding on to it.
And still healthy.
Yes, exactly.
What is the website?
Well, I have an online platform called Arketa. It's Arketa. I think probably the easiest way to find it is just to go to my website, JillianHessel.com. I also have a link tree, which has links to all of these places to sign up for the current class that's upcoming. And there's a 7-day free trial on my on-demand legacy library, which is always a good thing, because if you sign up right before a new class is coming on, you get to take the class and check out the library. You know, I'm just hoping to build that and expand that. I don't, align with any of the larger groups. It's just me, myself, and I.
It's not who you are, actually.
No, I'm a hybrid of the masters. I feel like I channel all the people and experience that I've had into who I am and how I send it out. And it's my legacy. And I always look at it for Pilates teachers. You go into the class you're going to teach, whether it's a group or a private, with your little tool bag, your tricks, whether it's a metaphor or an image, or you're demoing it with your own body. And this didn't work for that client. Maybe they're visual and you need to demo, or maybe they just need a different image for it to make sense, or maybe you just can't even, they're in sensory overload.
Mm-hmm.
So you pull out of your bag, as Ramana always said, teach to the client in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the gift that I hope to add to your toolkit.
Beautiful, Jillian. So if someone wants to reach out to you right now, is it better to call you or email you?
Probably to email. My email is very easy. It's just studio@JillianHessel.com. I do have a business phone number that you can text or call, which is 310, which is an LA area code, 310-246-0082. But, it's always welcome to get the email, because then I can respond in kind. I work with people all over the world, and the time zones are nuts. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Let's hope we get rid of daylight savings or whatever. I mean, just stick with one. I don't care which one. I hate changing time.
Exactly. Everyone's so confused during those times.
I know. And different parts of the world don't change times. Different parts of the States don't change times. Then Europe changes time different from when England changes time. It's enough to make you crazy. But I've done it.
You have, Jillian.
For 5 years. And I will add one thing. I'm going to be in Poland in October of 2025. I'm very excited, teaching for the International Pilates School. And there's going to be Deborah Colway doing Eve Gentry, Pat Guyton doing Ron Fletcher, Tan and Michael doing Ramana, Sarita Allen doing Kathy and myself doing Carola. So I'm pretty excited about that opportunity because not everybody wants to learn from the old guard anymore.
Oh, it's so important. It's so important.
So, yeah. Well, thank you, Darien.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
I hope we stay friends.
Yes, definitely. We have a lot in common. We've traveled similar paths.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll hear more about that when I interview you.
Yes. Okay.
On the next round. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jillian. All Things Pilates is produced, written, edited, and hosted by me, Darien Gold. Mastered audio mix, Fabian Romero. Original music, a.k.a. Johnny. If you're enjoying this show, we would love for you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts so you can let others know what you like or love about All Things Pilates. Also, if you're interested in helping to support this podcast, become a subscriber. It helps with the back-end costs that accrue when producing a show. To learn more about our growing community, check out our show notes. A bird sitting on a tree is never afraid of the branch breaking because the trust is not on the branch, but on its own wings. Always believe in yourself. Charlie Wardle.